Okay.
Romanian hot dog.
Okay, Rabbi Isai. Let's see. This is on. Yes, a good Chodesh, everyone. And a very special Chodesh. As we enter into the month of Adar, let's hope that it translates to Yeshua for Klal Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. It's been a very, very long time. I was thinking in my davening about, families that have the hostages there, and, how just how we really have to daven. There are so many people that are miserable. There are so many displaced people. There are so many people who their parnassus were mamish destroyed by October 7th. The tourist business, the restaurant business, all the reservists that have been away from their businesses and their families. This is besides all, the dangers that these soldiers live through every day, walking in the midst of booby traps and in the midst of human garbage. These terrorists are mamish. There's so much to think about and to daven for. Abi's dedication of this Masechta was right on target. I mean, really right on target for the safety of our troops and for Klal Yisrael. We're also sponsored by Shimon Klein, Eli Nishmas, Asher Anshel Ben Yehuda Gittel Bashim and Pinchas, by Irving Fishbaum, for Issa Ben Rezel, Eliezer Ben Rezel, Meir Ben Chaya Sarah. They should have a refuah shalema b'seich shachar Yisrael. I should throw it out there that the reprint of power benching in big form and in small form, there's going to be a bencher form done as well, is going in high gear. And if anybody wants to have a half a page or a whole page dedication in the Sefer, they should let me know and talk to me about it privately. Let's see, I did make a bracha already. We are holding by Boimine Rava Mirav Chista, which is 6 lines from the bottom of Tzadik Zayin Amid Beis. I mentioned in Shul very briefly, I'll mention, forgive me over here for those that heard it, that we know that it's brought down that Mishenichnas Adar Marbin B'Simcha. So I'll never forget it. I served Ramosha lunch, and I asked him, what's the practical application of Mishenichnas Adar Marbin B'Simcha? What, you tell people to increase joy. Everybody has their own idea of what does it mean to increase joy. What is halachically? It doesn't say, Mishnichnas av mematin b'simcha. There it says what it means. We don't do binyan shel simcha, netiya shel simcha. But what does it mean to be marbim b'simcha? As we welcome in Larry Tuchinski and Richard Rosenzweig, and Ramosha told me you could drink a little wine. That's first what he told me. And then he said, and of course, to learn more. That's what he said. Because we know that Ein Simcha K'Simcha Satayra Pikudei Hashem Yesharim Misamchei Leiv. So I went back up to the Beis Medrash and I said, listen to what the Rosh Hashiva said. And I then posed to the Beis Medrash. I said, how do you think the Rosh Hashiva fulfills learning more? He's always learning. How does he learn more? And the only thing that I was able to come up with is that he would wake up a few minutes earlier. Because imagine that, waking up a few minutes earlier, making yourself happier. But that was the only way, because Rav Moshe was always learning. Richard, this is a 2-night stayover? Wow.
No. I'm going to be coming home after this year.
Oh, okay. Well, we miss you over here.
Thank you.
You're working very hard, huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's kind of a crazy business.
It's crunch time, huh?
Yeah, it's crunch time, and it's going to get crunchier.
It's not even. Is it crunch time till April 15th?
Yes.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
That's what it is.
That's crazy. You know, but in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, it says Eslachatzenu, and the Haggadah says, what's lachatzenu? What's oppression? So the Haggadah translates lachatzenu zuatchak. That's pressure. Pressure is oppression. And the most Mefarshim say that the meaning is that they had to make 600 bricks a day, and if they were short one brick, they took a child instead and put it into the walls of Pitam and Ramsey. So imagine working with that pressure, that you know that if you were short a brick, they'll take a child instead. Maybe they'll ask you to pick which child. And to live that way every day, that's a very big pressure. You know, I'll tell you an interesting thing. People ask me from time to time, Rabbi Weiss, how come you never had a yeshiva? You have a yeshiva. Why don't you make a yeshiva? People have asked me, I should make a girls' high school. I was, for 38 years, I gave shiurim in seminary to girls. Let's make a seminary. Truth of the matter is I never wanted the pressure of having to raise money for these institutions. I dodged that pressure. And
you were just afraid of a base bedroom full of marshals.
And no, I would have thrown them out. That wouldn't have been a pressure at all. Probably wouldn't have even let them in the first place. Just some people just slip in, you know. They just slip in, you know. But anyway, yeah, pressure is a scary thing. Anyway, we want to welcome in Baruch Ian, who is sunning himself in Deerfield Beach without any pressure whatsoever, sitting there by the palm trees, and Rabbi Kranz, who sings songs so people shouldn't be pressured. Benzion Cohn, Mark Frankel, who's here 4 nights in a row. It's unbelievable. Aaron Sway, El Udell, Irving Fishbaum, Matthew Guy, Mel Zachter, what's his name? Menachem Umansky, Rich Lenner, Shimon Klein, Nachman Chapler. Nachman, we'll see you here on Shabbos.
That's the plan.
Good. We're looking forward. Dr. Black, Ruben Pollack, Jay Siegel, Shalom Fogel, that's Yitzi Muller, Michal, Yitzi Fuchs, Moshe Lehman, Abe Arbach, Elia Shutman here in the shul. We have Reb Avram, Michal Avram, Ruven Shanet, Saba, Rich Kramer. Oh, Reb Blumenfeld left. I know that our good friend Gedalia is in Boca, and Berish has a chasana. Anyway, so the Gemara says now, this is a very unusual question. If I give Mark a loan of bushels of wheat, and he makes up to pay me 10 sloim. V'isifu alav. They added silver, the municipality added silver to the coins. Now the problem is then, if Mark pays me with the new coins, which he has to because the old coins went out of circulation, when he pays me with the new coins, he's giving me more silver content. So that looks like ribbis. It looks like interest. And Mark would never want to make it look like interest, right? So what does he do? He gives me the new coins. You know, what do you mean? What does he do? He owes me 10. And now these are the 10 that is in circulation. He gives me new coins. Even if the new coins are as big as a sieve, this is just an expression that is really, you could see the difference in the size. Even if it's the size of a quarter of a cab, tartia is a quarter of a cab. I mean, that's a really perceptible increase of silver. So he said, but I don't understand. V'kazalian payre, the produce that I gave him is much cheaper than the coins that he's giving me. Now with the increase of silver, and it looks like ribbis, how could he do that? Amar Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi says, I chazinon, I machmas tivozil, if everybody sees that the relation between the tvua that I gave him and the value of the coins is differential because of the silver content, then you're right. Then menakinanle. Then we'll have to make an adjustment. And perhaps he'll only give me 9 coins to offset the greater amount of silver. But as we turn to Daf Tzadik Ches Amud Aleph, but v'imachmas tirazil, if the buying power that I have is more because the price of the grain went down. So even though I have more buying power because there's more silver, but it's not so recognizable because I have more buying power anyway because the price of the grain went down, so it doesn't loy menakinole. So the Gemara says, forget about the buying power. If he smelts it down and if I smelt it down and make bullion, I have more silver there. So it's shavach linyan nascha. If I smelt it down and there's more, and I make bullion out of it, I'm getting more silver, and therefore it sure looks like Mark is giving me ribbis. You know, there's some things in life that we don't want to do even if it looks that way. It's not really interest because I didn't make it up. I didn't make up. We're a victim of circumstances that the coins changed in weight. So it's not real interest. Interest is where you make it up beforehand. You have to pay me a certain amount more. But even if it looks like it, the truth of the matter is that my Rebbetzin Shashi is never comfortable when during COVID, when she heard the share, because it was upstairs in the house in Staten Island, I gave it in the dining room, and she was in the kitchen, she was in the house, and she heard the share. She was never comfortable with the banter that I did with Marshall. She was never comfortable with it. Because she said, it looks like you're embarrassing him. And she was always very concerned that nobody should think that I'm approving of embarrassing someone. So, if anybody thinks that, I do it to keep the audience alive and playful. But Chas v'Shalom, as we said in the Chumash here last night, and for those that, Marshall, for those that didn't bother staying for the Chumash here, we said in the Chumash here that Rav Shvadron, when he was in his youth, before he was known as the worldwide Maggid, he was a Rebbe in yeshiva, and the mashkiach of the yeshiva was away in Eretz Yisrael, in America, collecting money, and he was delayed, and the Bachrim said they wanted to hear a shmooze. So they went to Rav Shvadron and asked him if he would take the place of the mashkiach and give the weekly shmooze. And Rav Shvadron wisely was worried that he would probably show up the mashkiach, and when the mashkiach comes back and the boys would say, "Oh, you should have heard the shmooze we got from Rav Shvadron," he would feel bad. So he wasn't sure what to do. He was really in a dilemma, because on the other hand, the boys were not getting a shmooze. So he traveled to Ponevezh to ask the great Rav Chatzkel Levenstein what to do. And Rav Chatzkel was the mashkiach of Ponevezh, and one of the great Balmusas of our time. And Rav Chatzkel said to him that he has a Kabbalah Brura. He has a definitive Kabbalah from his Rebbeim, that if there would be a wherewithal to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, but in doing so you would hurt someone's feelings, then that would be a reason not to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. That's what a premium there is on not hurting people's feelings. But anyway, the Gemara says, Ella, the Gemara says, you're right. There is a cutoff that if the differential is Ella Kihad Rav Papa Rav Huna Breid Rav Yeshua of the Uvdei Bezuze, they had an incident with money. The Argedimim Staya, there was a money changer who was he was an Arabian merchant named Agdemis, Ad Yud Betamne, that if the differential was a differential of 10 to 8, that means that that means that the differential was so big that the silver was 20% more, right? Then you would have to deduct, and instead of giving, in other words, if 8 of the new coins equal 10 of the old coins, if the differential was so big, so then Mark would have to give me only 8 coins, so that it shouldn't look like ribbis. That's where, if the silver content was so increased, so then he would have to give me less in order that it shouldn't be michzei karibis. Now, Amar Rabba, hazoyrek matbea shel chavero liyam agadol. Now this is, because Rabbi Kranz was such a champion of the victim, so let's say Marshall throws Rabbi Kranz's silver dollar into the Mediterranean. So says the Gemara, Potter, Marshall is Potter. Why? Because he says to Rabbi Kranz, you go swimming anyway, there it is. You see it on the bottom? Get it. My timer. It's lying in front of you. If you want, take it. But that's only if it's clear water. The kachazile, he could see it and he could retrieve it. But if it's not clear, so he's not going to be able to find it, the loy kachazile loy. V'hani mili the adye yaduye. But that's only if Marshall hits Rabbi Kranz's hands and it flies out of his hand into the water. So that Marshall never acquired it. But if he grabbed it from his hand and did a wind-up like Sandy Koufax and he threw it into the water, Oh, then he has a mitzvah of Heshiv as Gazel. Then he has to get on his bathing suit and go dive and retrieve it for Rabbi Kranz. Then Migzil Gazla, he stole it from them. And then Hashava Ba'imevet. Then he has to make Heshiv as Gazel. He has to go in and retrieve it. So Masiv Rava, Ein Mechalelen Al Moy She'ena B'Rishusa. You cannot, remember this halacha, your Ma'aser Sheni, and the first, second, fourth, and fifth year of the Shemitah cycle, you after you take the first tithe and give it to the Levi, the second tithe you separate and you redeem it on money. You mechalel means to redeem it on money, and then you take that money up to Yerushalayim. So ein mechalelen al moed she'enon b'rishusa. You cannot redeem ma'aser sheni on money that's not in your possession. Ketzad. If you had money in Kastera, which is a very distant place, which is very dangerous to travel to, like if Marshall had money in Gaza, Oy Bahar HaMelech, or on the Royal Mountain, again, it's a sakana to go there, Oy Shenofal Kisei Liyam HaGadol, or if his purse fell into the Mediterranean, Ein Mechalin. But why? It's right there. He could retrieve it. So why can't he be Mechal on it? Says the Gemara, no. By Ma'aser Sheni, it says V'tzarta kesef biyodecha. You should bind the money in your hand. It has to be available in your hand. It has to be something that's right now available. Amarabba shani linya ma'aser debaina matzi biyodecha. It has to be available to your hand. Rachman Amar v'tzarta kesef biyodecha. You should bind the money in your hand. V'leka, and you don't have that. So while we're talking about this, you wouldn't believe what Marshall did to Mark, and that's after Mark is here for 4 days in a row. You would think, but no, Marshall doesn't care. V'amarabba. I do. Mark, I care. It warms my heart.
He's just a softy, Mark.
Yeah, I am a softy, except when it comes to certain people. V'amarabba, Hashof matbeya shel chaveri. You wouldn't believe this. Here, Mark has these beautiful silver dollars, and Marshall takes a hammer, pounds in the impression, and defaces the coin. Now, because he defaces the coin, don't get me wrong. Because he defaces the coin, the storekeepers don't want to take it. But he doesn't cause it to have less silver value, because when he pounds it, the silver stays there. It just goes inside. But he didn't subtract from its silver content. Potter. Why? My time he didn't do anything. It still has the same silver amount. And what the Rishonim say is, what do you mean he didn't do anything? The storekeepers won't take it. That's causative. That's only grama. But v'hani mili demachya bekurnasa. But that's only if he pounds it with a hammer, v'tarshe, causing the impression to go away. Avol shayfe b'shufina. But if he scrapes it with a file, then he makes it have less silver. Then he's chayiv. Tzurei chosrei. So now the Gemara says, so you mean if you don't take anything away, it's only causative? Masiv Rava hikayu al einai. This week's parasha, ayin tachas ayin. Hikayu al einai, if you hit him in the eye, v'sima, and blind him, al oznai v'chershay, on the ear, and you deafen him, evid yoitzbem, the Eved goes free. Keneged einai, if you bang the wall opposite the eye, the einai raya, kineged oiznai, if you bang opposite the ear of einai shemeya, so then ein eved yoytze b'hem l'cheres. Then the eved doesn't go free, because that's only causative. You didn't hit him directly. But if you hit him and he becomes deaf, he goes free. But everything is still there. Says everything is not there. Because Rabba l'tamei da'amar Rabba chershay la'aviv. If a person deafens his father, he's executed. Nerag. Why? Because if you draw blood from your father, you make a chabura, that's a capital crime. And when you deafen the person, it's because it causes the interior to bleed, and the blood causes him to be deaf. There wouldn't be a deafening mechanism below chabura, without a wound, the tips of the dama, because a drop of blood, nafle be'unye. And so therefore that's not that everything is intact. Now listen to this. Mama Rabba. Now here, Mark, who would for sure not go to Chicago, because every time he hangs around Marshall, problems happen. Mama Rabba.
I'm just a problem.
Now, Mark has a cow that was perfectly unblemished and suitable for a carbon. And what does Marshall do? Marshall happens to have a hole puncher with him, and he goes over to Mark's animal and says to Mark, "You want to see how nifty this hole puncher is?" And he makes a hole in the ear of Marshall's cow, and now, presto, just like that, the cow is as blemished, it's not kosher as a carbon. So Amar Rabba Tzayrim Oizen Pairasei Shel Chaverei. If Marshall nicks the ear of the cow of Marshall, potter, of Mark, potter. My time, a parakidakaima, it's a very functioning cow. It gives milk. The le'avid v'le'midei, he didn't take away the value of the cow. The cow still gives rides, and the cow still gives milk, and it's still going to be good for the meat market. V'kulu shvam lavlam is be'akaime. And it's not fit to be a carbon. Not every animal has to be used as a carbon. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If you do work with meichatas, we know that meichatas, water of lustration, that's the water that has the precious ash of the paraduma mixed in, which could be used to be matar, to purify somebody who's a tamei mace, or paraschatas, or you do work with a paraduma. A paraduma is like, worth millions of dollars. So Mark happened to have a paraduma. He's planning to buy a house right near the Kaisel and take a trip around the world, with a paraduma. And Marshall uses his hole puncher, but not hole puncher. No, in this case, Marshall does work with it. Marshall has some grapes. He puts it under the feet of the paraduma and presses the grapes and makes himself a cup of wine. And now there goes Mark's house near the Kaisel, and right. So the din is potter medine adam v'chayim medine shemayim, but it doesn't say a hole puncher. It's only because malachahu deloy minker as eka. There he worked with it, so you can't see it on the cow. Right? That's hezek shein and nicker. Avol tzayrim, but if he uses a hole puncher, the minker hezek, where it's noticeable, then doesn't that imply that he'll have to pay the value of the paraduma? Hachanami de mechayev b'dinei adam, even in the human court? No, says that's not so. Even in the case of the hole puncher, he wouldn't be chayiv to pay for the paraduma. Imrehu adin afilu tzayrim potter, because Mark could still use the milk of the cow. It's still a functioning cow. Even if he does just pressing the grapes, which is not discernible at all, he's chayiv morally. Has chayiv b'din shemayim. He's chayiv morally. Now, I'm telling you, Mark, you should pick your friends wisely. Mark has a promissory note. Mark has a promissory note. And, before we go any further, Stephen, we all want to ask you how your wife is feeling.
Well, Baruch Hashem, she's home. We're managing the situation. She's better. Surgeon said everything went well, Baruch Hashem.
Okay.
And we're hoping for complete full recovery.
So tell her in the name of the entire shir, we wish her from Hashem a refuah shlema b'sei shachar Yisrael.
Amen. Thank you very much. She appreciates the learning the other day and throughout the day. Thank you very much.
So anyway, as I was saying, Mark has a promissory note that Dr. Udell owes him $1 million. He has such a note. That's a valuable piece of paper, wouldn't you say? And Marshall burns it. Marshall comes with his candle and says to Mark, Mark, I like to make fire. And he takes this promissory note and he burns it. So, why? He says, look, the note itself is not worth anything except the value to use it as a cork on a bottle of Asti Spumante. It doesn't have any intrinsic value. The fact that without it, Mark can't get the money from Dr. Udell, that's not its intrinsic value, and therefore by burning it, that's only considered causative. The Amalei, Marshall says with that gleeful look, Naira Kloiminach, I just burned some paper. You want a piece of paper? I'll give you back a piece of paper. So Rami Bar Chama says, I don't understand. Anyway, if Marshall would have to pay, how would Mark be able to prove what it said on the shtar? It would only be if the witnesses, Baruch Ian and Rabbi Kranz, are around. If they're around, let them write another shtar. If they're not around, how would Mark be able to collect the money from Marshall anyway? Says in Hechidami, what's the case? No, I wasn't talking to you, Marshall. Hechidami, Ida ikasade diyode. If there were witnesses that know my have bishtara, in other words, the witnesses of the shtar Baruch and Rabbi Kranz are around, so then there's no loss at all. Let them write another shtar. Lichtav le shtar ma'alya. V'ida lekasade. If there are no witnesses, anan miyadina. How would we know? So Amar Rava. So Rava says it's talking about teheba maminoi. It could be talking about that the Marshall says he believes Mark that it was a shtar of $1 million. He believes it. But Lamai says he's potter because that's only a grama. Amarav Dimi Bar Chanina Had Rabba, this din of Rabba, that Marshall is potter when he burns the promissory note, is actually a machloikis Reb Shimon v'Rabbanan. Because the bottom line is even though Mark's note doesn't have any intrinsic value, but it's a davar agoreim l'mammon. It's something that generates money. With it, he could get $1 million. So the Gemara says, "Had Rabba machloikis Reb Shimon Rabbanan." The Reb Shimon damar davar agoreim l'mammon k'mammon dami. something that can generate money is considered like money. Mechayiv. Rabbanan davar agorim l'money lav mammon lav kamamen dami loy mechayiv. So the Gemara says no. It really is not contingent. It's not dependent on that machlokes. What's the machlokes of davar agorim l'mammon kamamen? Maskv Rav Huna Braid Rabbi Yeshua Ema Deshamat later Rabbi Shimon Davar Agarim Lamamin Kamamin Dami. That's bedavar she'ikroi mammon. That's something that intrinsically has value. Kidarabba. Dama Rabba goes al chametz lefnei haPesach. If let's say Marshall stole 100 barrels of beer before Pesach. Marshall stole from Dr. Black 100 barrels of Heineken. And Rich, who saw on Erev Pesach, by the Zman HaBir, he saw 100 barrels of beer, so Rich, as a good Samaritan, burnt it. Now, right then, it's not worth anything anyway, because chametz on Pesach is not worth anything. So Rich burnt it. Except that Marshall is frantic, because he knows that the din is that after Pesach, if he would return the 100 of barrels to Dr. Black, he would be off the hook. Even though they would be asr, because chametz she'avar of a Pesach is asr, so it has no value. But he could say, Hari shalcha lefanecha, here's your beer. Because it's a hezek shein and nikr. The problem that the beer is not good is not discernible. So Marshall would have been able to return the beer to Dr. Black. And now, because Rich burnt it, he can't do that. So now that's a case of something that is not mammon, because it's also after Pesach. But since it's a davar agorim l'mammon, Reb Shimon says Rich has to pay. Now that at least is something that has an intrinsic value. 100 bottles of beer have an intrinsic value. So let's see the case inside. Kidarabba, Dama Rabba, Gazal Chametz Lifnei Pesach. Let's get our thieves over here. Let's get it straight. Marshall stole from Dr. Black 100 barrels of beer. Uba'ach of his surfer. When it came the time of burning chametz, Rich, with the zealot that he is, he came and burnt it. Potter. Shakol mitzuvan alav levaroi. If he burnt it at the time before Pesach, then everybody holds Rich's potter. Because that's what you got to do before Pesach. You got to burn chametz. La'achar Pesach, if Rich burns it after Pesach, so machloikis Reb Shimon Rabbanan. That's machloikis Reb Shimon Rabbanan. L'Reb Shimon davar agorim l'mammon kamamen dami. Since it's something that would have generated money for Marshall, because Marshall could have taken 100 barrels and returned it to Dr. Black and say, so even though it doesn't have a value, because it's chametz achar Pesach is also ba'ana, but he's chayiv, because he took away something that was gorim l'mammon, that would generate money for Marshall. L'Rabbanan dimrei davar agorim l'mammon lav kamamen dabi pater. But there we're talking about something that at least has its intrinsic value. 100 barrels of beer has value. But b'davar she'ein ikroi mammon, but a note, this note is not worth $1 million. This note is only worth $1. It's good as a cork, maybe 50 cents. But b'davar she'ein ikroi mammon mi amrinan. So the Gemara says, here's the definitive answer. By the way, I should tell you the schedule this evening. There is a special event. Unfortunately, I thought that the special event would be a chak, but I'm not fully ready to do the chak. Truth of the matter is, I was on schedule to do the chak. My back was hurting me a little bit, so I went to a chiropractor today. So that threw off my schedule. So the chak is not ready, but my schedule was also amply thrown off. That after the shir, I did the Mishnah Yomis already. We're going to have the segment for the Shabbos table. That will be after the shir. Again, I tell people that if you're going to be in fairways for Shabbos, the shir is not for you, because I'm going to speak about some of the things that I say in this year on Shabbos. So you want to have it fresh for Shabbos. So the shir is not for you, but otherwise you're more than welcome to join me as I record this segment called For the Shabbos Table. Now, Amar Ameimer, the definitive halacha on burning somebody's promissory note, man did don dina de garmi. Now we're going to learn, there's a big machlokes rishonim if garmi and grama is the same thing. Right now we're going to take the easy route, that garmi and grama is the same thing, and therefore if you hold your chayiv for a causative act, because Marshall burnt Mark's shtar, he's not going to be able to collect from Dr. Udell. So man de don dina de garmi magve be dmei shtar yamalya, then Mark could collect $1 million from Marshall. Or man de loy don dina de garmi, but if you don't rule that you're responsible for causative actions, so then magve be dmei naira ba'alma, then you can only collect the price of a court. Hava uvda, there was an incident. The kafya Rafram l'Rav Ashi, Rafram pressured Rav Ashi. Now what happened is Rav Ashi, when he was a child, burnt one of Rafram's promissory notes. Now, even though when you're a child you're potter, but when you grow up, there's a moral obligation to make good for the damage you did when you were a child. And therefore Rafram pressured Rav Ashi, v'agvebei, and he collected kikashura l'tzalma. He collected from the idios, from the best property of Rav Ashi. The phrase kshura l'tzalma is a quality beam that's used to make designs. In other words, when they wanted to make a decorative design, so they used the best kind of beam, that because it was there not just for its sturdiness, but also because it was showcasing a design. Now, let's go back to this, that you could say by Isurei Hana, Hari Shalachol Lefanecha, because that's what Marshall does. He steals 100 barrels of beer from Dr. Black, and then after Pesach, when it's Chomet Shavar of Pesach is Asab Hana, and it's Isurei Hana, still Marshall gives it back to Dr. Black and says, here, Hari Shalachol Lefanecha. So Chomet Shavar of Pesach, Amalai, he could tell Dr. Black, Hari Shalachol Lefanecha. Now, is that universal? Does everybody hold that you could take Isurei Hana and say, here it is? Man tona oimrim Isurei Hana Hari Shalachol Lefanecha. So Amar Rav Chisda Reb Yaakov, it's the well-known opinion of Reb Yaakov. The Tanya, and you know, you look at the size of this Amid, and it brings to mind, one time we were learning a Gadata Gemara, and the Amid was very big. And Irving had either counted the words or somebody had told him the amount of the words. And he cited that I always say in the name of the Gain that you get a separate mitzvah saseh for every word. So when you have a daf like this is payday, my friends. This is we're really accomplishing. How many mitzvahs we get when we learn a daf like this. The Tanya, good for other. Reish Chodesh Adar. The Tanya, shor shehemis, a shor that kills. Now we know a shor that kills has to be stoned. This week's parsha. Okay? This week's parsha, a shor sakal yisakal ashar. So shor shehemis, a shor that kills. Ad sheloi nigmar dinoi, before its verdict is passed, is issued, so it's not yet condemned to die. So if Marshall has this shor, I think Marshall left. Hey, watch out, everybody. Hold on to your shtaris. Marshall is is looking around. Okay, so sitting in his seat is Richard. So Rich has a shor that killed someone. So if he sells it before the verdict is issued, or if he dedicates it to the temple before the verdict is issued, good one. Good one. So anyway, if he sold it before the verdict is issued, or he dedicated it before the verdict is issued, the sale is a good sale. And by the way, we learned earlier, and then it's not executed. He gets the shor off the hook from execution, because it's only executed if it has the same owner from the time of its case until its verdict. So if he sells it, it's a sale and it's not executed. So shor shehemis actually nigmar dinai. If the shor killed someone before the verdict is issued, machru, if he sold it to Yitz. Who's doing this? Says the Gemara again. If he sold it before the verdict was issued, hikdishay muktish shachtai. If Rich slaughtered it, b'sarei mutter. And let's say Rich was guarding this animal for Mark, and it gored, and Rich returned it to Mark before the verdict was issued. Comes along Rabbi Yaakov. Even if the verdict was issued and Rich was watching it, now it's already asabana, he still could give it back to Mark and say, Rabbi Yaakov, even after it was condemned, and therefore it's asabana, so the Gemara says, "My lab, it must be this is the argument. The Rabbi Yaakov Rabbi Yaakov says that you could say here's yours. No, once it becomes asbana, Rich can't give it back to Mark and say here's your shore. Says the Gemara, no. Everybody holds that you could say because that's the din. We said that Marshall could return the 100 barrels of beer to Dr. Black, and nobody argues about that. Because if not, everybody agrees that Marshall could return to Dr. Black the 100 barrels after Pesach, even though they're also Hana, and say, Irish Shalachol Fanecha. So then what's the issue over here? There's a different issue. You see, Rich was watching Mark Schur. And Mark, if Rich would have returned it before it went to get its verdict, Mark would have caused the animal to disappear. Mark would have sent the animal to the Agam, to the marsh. And without the animal, they wouldn't be able to condemn it, because you could only condemn the animal b'fanav. It says, Kamisas abal, kach misas ashar. So by not returning it, he cost Mark money. And therefore, if he returned it only afterwards, Mark will say, you returned it too late. Normally you could say, but here Mark said, you returned it too late, because if you would have returned it before the verdict, I would have made it disappear. Here the question is, can they issue the verdict without the shor being in the courtroom? Rabbanan say that they can't do it unless the shor is there. And therefore, when Rich returns it only after the verdict, so Rabbanan say, sorry, Rich, but Mark says, sorry, you messed me up. If you would have given it to me before they issued the verdict, have a marikna leila agma, I would have caused it to disappear in the marsh, and then they wouldn't have been able to condemn it. Now that you gave it to the court and you only returned it afterwards, it's too late. I can't do it. I can't deal with anybody anymore. Rabbi Yaakov says, no, it wouldn't have helped if Mark sent it to the Agam. Rabbi Yaakov Sava, and therefore, Rich says, what would be the difference if I returned it to you? Even if you would cause it to disappear, they would have issued the verdict without it being there. And therefore, you can't have a taina on me that I didn't return it beforehand. Now, Ashkeche Rav Chisda l'Rabba bar Shmuel. Rav Chisda found Rabba bar Shmuel. Amalei, he said to him, Tanisa midei b'Yisriana. Did you teach anything specific about things that are asbana? In Yiddishkeit we have a lot of things that are asbana. Basa b'chalav is asbana. Yayin nesech is asbana. The things that you can't even give to your cleaning lady. Right? If you have basa b'chalav, you can't even give it to your cleaning lady. If you have yayin nesech, you can't give it to your cleaning lady. Amalei in. So he says, yeah, I learned things about Yisriana. Tanina. V'heishav esagzela. It says in the pasuk v'heishav esagzela asher gazel. So it already says v'heishav esagzela. It already says you return the theft. Matam loim asher gazel. Is that rhetorical statement? You return the theft which you stole. Says the Gemara, Yalzer ke'ein shegazel. Your responsibility is to return it the way that you stole it. Mikan Amar, gazel matbeya v'nifsel. If you stole a coin and it went out of currency, went out of circulation. Peiris v'kivu. Now here, peiris v'kivu, we're going to see this means that it got rotten inside. So it wasn't discernible. Yayin v'nisnasech. Wine, and it was offered as a libation for Avodah Zarah. Truma v'nitmeis, truma and became tomei. Chametz v'avar ava pesach. Behema v'nevda ba'aveira, an animal that was involved in bestiality or was worshipped. V'shar ad shaloi nigdam adinai, and a shar before it's condemned. Says the Gemara, Man Shamaslay, who holds the Amar Acheloi Nigma Dina in only before it was condemned, Mishinigma Dina Loi, but after it's condemned not, Rabbana. The Ketani, and yet it says v'chametz of a Pesach, that chametz that passes Pesach, so you see that it's not because it's Isuri Anah. Because if you wouldn't be able to return Isuri Anah, then you shouldn't be able to return chametz that was of a Pesach. It must be that the reason that if the verdict was issued that you can't return it is because then you didn't give Mark a chance to cause it to disappear. Amalei, so he says it's a good raya, but if the Talmidim find you, don't tell them this, because it will show that I didn't know this proof. So that I don't want to be embarrassed, so don't tell them this proof. I guess what he meant is I'll tell it to them in my own time. Don't tell it to them and cause me the embarrassment. Of course, he would not tell them, because we all want to teach Torah's emes. But let me tell them, instead of them finding out from someone else that I was wrong. Peiros v'hir kivu. Now we learned in the Mishnah, if peiros become rotten, that's hezek nikar and you can't return it. Here it says peiros that became rotten is hezek she'ena nikar. So Paris Vikiva Iva Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah Paris Vikiva, you can't return it, but Mishal Kishas Exeli, you have to restore fresh fruit. Amra Papa Kancher Kivu Kulan. In our Mishnah it means it got rotten from the outside. So it got rotten from the outside, that's a Hezek Nikar. Kancher Kiva Miksasan, it became rotten internally, that's not discernible, and therefore you're allowed to return it. Now we're just going to start the new Mishnah. We're not going to learn much more because the next daf is smaller, so we'll save the Gemara, but let's at least start the Mishnah. Nazan lo'omnan, if let's say we gave Steve wood to make a chessboard, Vikilkalai, and he ruined it. He said, "Oh, I didn't know that there's 64 squares in a chessboard. I thought that was only 59." He ruined it. He ruined the set. Chayav l'shalom. He has to pay. Nasan l'chera sheda teva migdal. If you give a carpenter a chest, a box, or a cupboard, l'sakin to fix, v'kilkel chayav l'shalom. V'abanai, a builder, shekibel olav lister as hakaisel. He accepted to take down a wall, to dismantle a wall. V'shibaran avanim, and they were going to then use the stones to make a stronger wall. But he broke the stones. Oishe zikon, or he damaged them. Chayiv l'shalem, he has to pay. He was dismantling a wall on one side, v'nafal mitzad acher, and unbeknownst to him there was a structural flaw in the house, and it caused a wall to fall down on the other side. That's considered potter. That's considered an einus, because he had no way to know that he had to brace the other side. However, if he banged it too hard, when he was dismantling the wall, he banged it unprofessionally, he banged it too hard, and because of that the other wall came down, then chayiv, then he's responsible for it. Now, before we conclude, there's something else. First of all, Motzei Shabbos Shir is 8. Secondly, next week I'm going to go away for a day or two to celebrate my anniversary. What I'm going to try to do, it's not 100% yet, but what I'm going to try to do is I'd like to be able to miss one night, probably Tuesday night. So in order to do that, my plan is to give 2 shiurim on Sunday. I plan to give the regular shiur at 8 o'clock on Sunday, and I also plan to give, Hashem should give me the strength, I also plan to give a shiur at, let's see, next week Mincha is at 5:10? 5:10? So if Mincha is at 5:10, so 5:25, 5:35. About 5:50, I plan to give a daf as well. So there'll be a 10 to 6 daf on Sunday and an 8 o'clock daf on Sunday. That's tentatively now. I should be able to prepare 2 blot for Sunday. That's tentatively the plan. A 10 to 6 shiur on Sunday and an 8 o'clock shiur on Sunday. That's the tentative plan for Sunday. And then there will not be a shiur Tuesday night. That's tentatively what I'm planning to do. Now, we did the Mishnah Yomis. Now we will do the segment for the Shabbos table.